Welcome to Human with Delta Forks. I have my guest Bandito here with me. I've known Bandito for quite a while. So, how's your day going?
Pretty good, man. Pretty good. It's a lovely day, beautiful sky out. Spent some time outside. Um, Pretty good, man.
Especially
How's
this.
yours?
So far, so good. I haven't spent a whole lot of time out today. I was doing some housework earlier, so just making sure everything kind of chilled out for this, and so it didn't strain my
Sure.
voice too much. But uh, other than that, it's a good time to be outside. The weather's turning, at least over here.
Uh, it was a bunch of lawn work for me, so don't think I was out having fun.
Hey, well, I mean, it's middle afternoon in Eastern time zone right now, so I mean, better get it done in the morning when it's not quite as hot.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. All right, so we'll start off with a philosophical question.
Okay.
So, do you think that every person is conscious or sentient, or maybe some people are just animals?
Oh man, I was actually talking. I recently got married, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I was talking with my
Congratulations.
wife about this exact thing, mostly over a lot of the Favor and Uber apps, right? But we were talking about a lot of people being on autopilot. Just I'm here to do one thing. I don't need to go above and beyond. I'm autopilot focused, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is cool, and you'll excel at that one thing. But that that's how I see a lot of people. Um, yes, it's considerate when you take that extra step. You go in above and beyond. It's considerate towards other people, but in my perspective and from what I see, you're not necessarily going to achieve much for yourself. You're really hurting yourself by just staying on that autopilot. And unfortunately, I feel like a lot of people are. A lot of people are on that autopilot.
Yeah, it's you wonder if they could ever come back, or that's just how they live.
Yeah, exactly. Which I mean, to each their own. I'll never dictate how another person lives, but that's just what I see.
Yeah, and I think that's perfectly valid. And for reference, that is called the philosophical concept of zombies.
Fair enough. I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yeah, it's
That sounds about right.
yeah, it is, and it was one of those things they taught me in college. That what that my professors always hated it because I would always tell them like, and now I can ask you why you want fries with that. So, getting into your
That's
background,
funny.
yeah,
Sorry, that's funny.
no, you're good. They hated it. Um, Two of them are PhDs now, and they're like, but me as a 22-year-old college kid loved it. It was fantastic.
Oh yeah.
All right, so getting into your background a little bit, and I think it's more for you to share, and I think it's very interesting.
Sure. So, oh man, where to start? Well, I was good for nothing high school kid, right? I had no plans, I had no objective. I just knew that I was joining the Air Force and they were gonna figure it out for me, right? And boy did they ever. I did want to be a firefighter.
Yeah.
That was kind of my thing, right? My father was a firefighter in the Air Force. I That was like my one goal, right? If I had any, was join the Air Force, go be a firefighter. Well, they had other plans for me. It's kind of how that
Yeah.
works. But, I went I they put me into what's called geospatial analyst. It's military intelligence, but it works a lot with the drones, right? The video feed, high altitude imagery. The best way I can really describe it that most people know is the Cuban Missile Crisis, how we found that out, imagery, right?
Right.
That was my group of people, right? Um, well, the Air Force was a little funny. The school for that is also the same school where the firefighters are.
Well, at least you got to
And
be around it.
yeah, at least I got to see them go do what I wanted to do, right? Even more so, because I had joined in 2010 and this whole drone thing was really starting to kind of kick off, right? And the war in Afghanistan was going nuts. Iraq was kind of cleaning up. There was a lot of people being pushed through my career field. And so when I got to my technical school, they did not have space for us. So even more funny, where did they put us?
Outside?
In the firefighter barracks.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Possibly even worse.
So when I get to my barrack room, laying on my bed because it was supposed to be a firefighter's room is a whole fire training manual. Just man,
So close but so far.
so close. But yes, I mean, honestly though, I ended up loving that job. It was I wish I could still be doing it today. I decided to take another path.
Mm,
Um, I did that for 7 years. Now I say 7 years. 6 was with the Air Force. 1 was with a company called Booz Allen Hamilton. Uh, you may remember that because that's what Edward Snowden was working for.
right.
Now he didn't do anything with Booz Allen. That was all prior to Booz Allen, but um, that they picked up a contract, and I decided to get out of the military and kind of chase that money
Yeah, I get it.
because you got to. And the military was never like the end goal for me. Go in, get some training, get some discipline, get out, kind of thing. Go start my career. So I only did that contract for 1 year, which ended up being good because they lost the contract about a year after that. So it was good that I had a head start on the rest of my life.
Controlled fall.
Um, yeah, exactly right. Control fall. Um, but I went out. I wanted to do law enforcement. That was my plan getting out in the first place until the contract kind of called me. Um, went out for the second time and came back to Texas, joined the Bexar County Sheriff's Office. It was a very interesting time. I spent just about 2 years there. I wasn't on the street. I was not a. I was a sheriff's deputy,
Hmm.
but my department was the jail. I worked at the jail for about 2 years. That's kind of how most sheriff's offices go. Is you do your due like you pay your dues in the jail, and then we'll train you to be out on the street.
Okay.
Now is a little bit different than when I joined it. Now everybody's hurting, so even the Bexar County Sheriffs, they offer a program where we'll send you straight to the street because everybody's hurting for manpower. But that wasn't an option for me. I had to go pay my dues, and manpower in the jail was real tight. It was real tight. It'd be me versus 88 inmates on any given day. That's it. With backup, you know, 30 seconds away.
Right.
But 30 seconds is a long time.
Yeah, 1v88's not good odds.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not great odds, but honestly in the Bexar County Sheriff's Office, it taught me a lot of things, especially de-escalation because when you're 1 versus 88, you don't want to go in there fighting.
No.
Um but and I'll say I had to worry more about the people in blue than I had to worry about the people in orange, if that makes any sense, right? I didn't have to worry about the inmates. I could handle them. It was the backstabbing and everybody's trying to fight for that higher position and so
The weaseling.
about 2 years, yeah, right. About 2 years into that, I figured, no, and because the manning level was so low, they kept pushing back the time you had to pay your dues. It started with 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and I'm done. I'm
Right.
gonna go that's what I wanna go and do is be out on the street, so everybody's looking for people at this point. I decided to leave that, pick up a transitionatory job, at least what I thought at the time as a security officer at a hospital.
Hmm.
Well, I had police applications going. Those take months.
Right.
Um, well, after a couple months of me working in that hospital, I loved it there, man. I
Hmm.
loved it. I loved the people. I loved the job. I felt like I can actually do some good there. People were actually excited to see me.
Right.
Uh, I pulled those police applications, and I've been with this hospital system, not that hospital,
Right.
but it's a hospital system in my city's area. I've been with them for about 5 years now. I've worked up from a contract security officer. We came in house, so everybody's a hospital employee. Now I'm the director of the security department on my own facility now. So I've worked up to that. I'm very proud of those accomplishments. I'm very proud of the team that I work with, that I've worked with at several hospitals. I've kind of traveled all over Texas, going to different hospitals, kind of assessing their security posture. And
Mhm.
um, man, I'll be honest, I don't want to be anywhere else. But that's really it was kind of longer than I thought it would be. But yeah, that's about me. That's about my background and history there.
Hey, that's hey, hats off to you. You've done a lot of civil service. You know about my background, kind of with attempting to join the military and kind of how that went down, and not maybe not so poorly. So I think we've had conversations about at least the topics of maybe like military intelligence stuff, because that's what I was supposed to be
Mm,
before it turns out that hey, you're colorblind, you can't do that. So uh,
yeah.
it's I'm sure it makes sense, but I also knowing the government, it's probably a good idea fairy thing. So could be either or. Wasn't to be. I try not to let myself, I don't beat myself up over it. I attempted it.
Yeah,
Uh,
they get real picky, and sometimes there's something you can't do, and all right, fine, and move on to the next thing.
well, which is funny because I didn't know I was colorblind going into it. Like the
Oh,
civilian
they'll
doc,
find out.
yeah, he looked at the judge, and the civilian judge just looked at me like, yeah, hey, you're colorblind. I'm like, what? Okay.
All right.
But speaking going, or I guess going back to your military intelligence background, uh, and I'm gonna throw a little bit of a pop culture reference at you, and you might be able to put some realness to it. Uh, so, are you familiar with the Boondocks? There's a,
The TV show?
the TV show.
Yeah.
So Sam Jackson's famous line, known, known unknowns and unknown unknowns, which uh, I'm not going to attempt to quote it, but so how present was that in the mind of the MI community at the time,
Um, present in the mind.
or acknowledged?
Honestly, it definitely not at first, right? It takes a while to find that, and honestly, I'm lucky that I did. A lot of my compadres, if you will, um, never really kind of got that message. Yeah, I believe in that fully. There's known knowns, there's known unknowns, and then there's unknown unknowns. You just don't know what you don't know. And when, especially with my career field, right? Surveillance. We're observing people. That's what we did. Whether it was live video or shall I say near real time
Mm-hmm.
video, because there might be like a second or two delay,
Right.
or it was imagery, which would be even worse. Is you have to keep that open mind. There may be things that you don't even know exist at what you're looking at, and you have to really dive in. um get your cultural briefs in, go like learn some things about what you're looking at before you even start looking at it, so that you can have that open mind at the very least. Overall, it just makes you a better analyst, because unknown unknowns, right? You don't know what you don't know,
You can't plan
but
for it either.
you can't plan for it, but at least you can give yourself the best shot, and that's study. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
honestly, as boring as that sounds, like, oh, you're supposed to be in the military and go break stuff and blow stuff up. Study,
Mm-hmm.
study. That's what really I don't mean to gloat a little bit, but it's what really kind of set me apart from others. I got assigned cooler missions, if you will, cooler missions and stuff, because I took the time to go prepare for that, prepare for those unknown unknowns.
I think kind of speaking to the study part, it and kind of preparing for the unknown unknowns, it kind of helps you. It trains you to be on your toes. It's
Yeah, you have to be.
well, it's like because I did a little bit of boxing when I was younger, and it's like everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face.
100%.
And so it's if you've never been punched in the face, you don't know how you're gonna react to it. So if you don't
Yeah,
consider the fact that there's something you don't know that you couldn't have possibly planned for, you're gonna get punched in the face. You're gonna look real dumb.
yeah.
Uh,
And honestly, sorry for interrupting,
oh,
but
go
that
ahead.
also translates to the LE world, the law enforcement world, even in the jail, right? you don't know how you're gonna react until something happens, and just give yourself the best shot, right? If I had all 88 inmates come after me because I pissed them off, I guess, sorry
Hmm.
if I cussed, but, um, how are you gonna react? Your training helps. Dive into your training. Train often, right? Study often. It's gonna give you the best shot. Now, no, you will never know how you're gonna react
Hmm.
to any situation until it occurs. But give yourself the best shot.
Right, and especially in maybe like a prison jail kind of situation, it helps to know culture.
100%.
And what was it? There was I forget when it happened, but I know that there was some issue or with imagery specifically in military intelligence. They like airstruck a bunch of trucks that supposedly had missiles on the back, but they were like telephone poles or some shit.
I mean, I don't mean to laugh because that's pretty
That's somebody that
unfortunately, it was
yeah,
common.
yeah, and
Uh,
it's funny later, but that's a lot of taxpayer dollars, and you know that it could have been worse. That hey,
yeah.
that happened a lot in the early GWAT.
And it really did. I like to call it, the Old West.
Hmm.
It happened with Iraq, it happened with Afghanistan, it happened with Syria. There's an Old West period until right, we're coming in, and until we figure out what's going on here, there's almost no rules.
Right,
And unfortunately, that is war. It sucks. Um, Bad things are gonna happen. I mean, that's war, period. Um, there's definitely some times, that, it kinda sucked
oh,
real bad, but, I'll be honest, there was times where, how do people place IEDs, right? They dig. How do they dig? They have a shovel.
right,
So, it's very interesting when you're so many feet up in the air trying to look at the ground and you're trying to dictate, is that a shovel or an AK-47?
right, or an RPG or
I couldn't, yeah, or an RPG. I can't make 100% confidence call on that, um, which is unfortunately sometimes good enough for an airstrike.
right. It what is it? They say a lot of times in the military is officer risk mitigation. So
Sometimes it's a lot of risk mitigation because honestly, you have to think about it. Like, say a lot of my job was convoy overwatch too,
mhm,
right? And is it worth potentially these lives coming down this road?
for that one guy that's standing in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Right, or maybe he was,
Maybe he
maybe that
was,
was, right? And there were times where it got confirmed that's what was going on,
hmm,
right?
especially at
A
night.
lot more so than not. Yeah, especially at night.
Hmm.
But and see, that's those unknown unknowns, where you have to do the culture briefs.
Right.
Afghanistan specifically, and this isn't exactly what I'm talking about,
Hmm.
with the previous question, but Afghanistan exactly, what is their primary job? They're farmers. Who wants to farm when it's hot outside?
Not me.
So they do a lot of farming while it's night,
Right.
right? And so those are things that you have to plan for and think about and prepare for, right? That's that studying. Even though I know that's like skimming the surface, it goes much deeper than that. But just little things like that help um avoid those situations,
Right.
right?
They save lives on one. They potentially could save lives on one side or the other. Somebody that didn't need to go, but
Hopefully both.
hopefully
Hopefully
both.
both sides.
Right, and that's the goal: hearts and minds, and bring in people that have to go home. Uh,
Yeah, 100%.
so, kind of shifting over a little bit, not far over, but what was it like working in military intelligence, and what was it like working with other branches, and were there differences and similarities that you would take note of?
Um, the Army, the Marines, I worked with quite frequently. They have the same career field, completely different job.
Hmm.
It's very interesting. I hated working with them. Uh, because mostly because back to what we were talking about, that study and that care that they put into the job, it just wasn't there. I mean, there might have been 1 or 2 people, right? But for the most part, what I saw, it just wasn't there, so I didn't like working with them.
Mm,
Um, I did work with a lot of other countries and their military services. Australia, love them.
mm,
They are about that life. We're gonna get the job done correctly,
mhm.
kinda life. The Brits, they're same way, but they add a lot more humor. Everybody has, like, this idea of the British humor being very dry.
Yeah.
Oh, man. They
It depends
they
on who
got
you're
some
talking to.
jokes.
Yeah.
It depends on who you're talking to. They got some jokes. Norwegians, I mean, you name it, there's probably been a country that I had spent some time with,
You got sprinkled around NATO a little bit.
yeah, yeah, exactly, and, uh, I loved working with them, gotten to network with them, and just seeing how they do the job. It's it's interesting, right? Kinda back to that first philosophical question you asked
Mhm.
me. Um, I'll direct it mostly towards Americans, unfortunately. And don't get me wrong, I love where I'm at, but
Sure.
working with those other countries and seeing their mindsets, completely different. They're about getting it done and getting it done correctly, going above and beyond. Where a lot of Air Force, Army, Marines. I never really worked with the Navy, but I'm sure there's still a career field that's the same, and I'm sure it's the same for them. Is it? A lot of it was autopilot.
Right. It's more of a institutional culture thing.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Maybe those other countries had a little bit more to prove, right? They're getting these resources from the big dog, America,
Mhm.
and we're gonna put our best foot forward, right? Maybe.
Makes sense. I mean, you're not gonna show off to the superpower with, you're just third rate guy. I wouldn't if it
Yeah,
was me. So I would send my best
right.
and brightest.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I mean, maybe that's what happened, maybe it isn't, but I could say that's what it seemed like.
Right.
But I the NATO forces that I worked with, they were about that life.
I think there's a lot of motivation because a lot of times it was with, I mean, operation and in training. I imagine
Mm.
that their motivation to really perform well, and maybe to say that they outperform the Americans is high.
There's some times, man. There's some times
I've
like,
heard I've
holy
heard
crap,
about the
I can't keep up.
competitiveness. What was it that no one ever really reads the whole report, but that one training exercise where like 100 Brits like outflanked 1,500 Marines or something like that. Never mind
I'm
that
sure
Never mind that the Marine or the Brits were acting under a Marine commander at the time, so I heard. Uh, and there was
he
some.
had something to prove.
Yeah, those guys had something like, yeah, somebody made him mad or he was vying him for a promotion, but he took those Brits and I mean everything I've heard about them is they all fought hard. So,
Oh yeah,
they
oh
bled
yeah.
like we did. Or y'all did.
I mean, more power to him. I'll never go up 1,500 Marines. No, no,
No. That's yeah, that's a lot of note.
that's a lot of no.
So, I guess that kind of also transitions that a lot of civilians, myself included, even though I was tangential, like I was supposed to go into it. So I did a little bit of research, and I've known you for years, so I've gotten a little bit of insight to it. But a lot of civilians, when you say military intelligence, they kind of immediately go over to James Bond or spies or something like that. So when with that, or in your analysis of it, so would you ever take part or witness anything that might upset that reality, or is it really military intelligence is an oxymoron kind of deal?
It's an oxymoron. A monkey could do the job.
Yeah.
Um, honestly, I mean, there's so many different parts to it. It's that's why you always hear the term intelligence community,
Mm,
because there are so many different parts to it, right? My part was geoint, right? Geospatial analysis, intelligence. You've got human,
mhm.
right? Human intelligence. You got OSINT, open source. I mean, it goes on and on and on. Every little thing that you can think of, there's an intelligence source out of it, and there's a group of people working on it. Um, and so Yeah, sure, there's spies. Yeah, sure, there's James Bonds in the world.
Those are working
Um,
for alphabets and a
yeah,
government.
exactly. They're not working for a military,
Yeah,
alright,
I mean, they
per
might.
se.
Yeah, I mean, they might use some of your imagery or your drone or something like that, but they're not going to be standing in the room more than likely.
No, they're out in the field, they're out doing something, sure. Me specifically, I mean, our world, it was so disconnected from that. Um, I never heard of anything or saw anything that might have led me in that direction or any which way, but yeah, I'm sure and back to the intelligence community part of it, it all goes together, right? And the coolest thing was it was almost like a Google, but you can go and search um as long as you had the cleared
Hmm.
systems to do it. Go search intel. Hey, I'm looking for bad guy XYZ or what have you. And yeah, there was almost like a Google platform for okay, it pulls up everything with bad guy XYZ. Or at least whatever's been uploaded to that
Right.
system. But
They'll let you
um
see those shiny rocks.
yeah, the intelligence community is all about sharing information with people that need to know it. That's also a big thing. Talking about the research into that kind of world, right? I did have a top secret SCI clearance, which is pretty high,
Right.
um, if not the highest. But it doesn't really mean too much. What means the most is the need to know, right? You don't just get like oh, are there aliens in Area 51? Well, here's your top secret clearance. Here's all the information. You don't get that.
It's super
You need to know.
compartmentalized.
Super compartmentalized. So
Because otherwise you get stuff like Edward Snowden could have been worse. From
yeah,
a government perspective, he could have been worse. But he only had a chunk, and he laid his chunk bare for however you think about it, or your opinion of what he did or why he did it, or that's
for sure,
complicated. That's very complicated. Uh,
for sure.
so among your time, and we briefly discussed it last week, but if you can say it, because I know the nature of classifications and things. Did you ever see anything that would be like, oh man, that you can talk about?
Um, I'll answer that question with another question here, real quick. When you say "oh man," do you mean positive "oh man" or negative "oh man"?
Hey, that's up to you. Like I'm all about that 85% rule. You're doing 85% of the talking here.
Well, I'll give you both examples.
Okay,
How about that? Is that good?
sounds good to me.
Today, April 13th, is the 7-year anniversary of
Hmm.
the Moab bomb being dropped. Um, I had a pretty big part of
Okay.
that. Which a lot of the planning, analysis, geospatial, like it's a lot of geography work too, right? You don't just look at pictures; you have to be an analyst,
Right.
and so there's a lot of schools into it. But um, that was oh man, like pretty cool.
Yeah.
Um, being involved in that. Obviously, I can't go too much
For
into it,
sure.
but it was pretty crazy. It was a long, very thought out operation. Obviously, right. I talked about the autopilot, but when
Hmm.
it comes to something like that,
That
nobody
no, you
is
can't
on
be.
autopilot.
You can't be.
You can't be.
Because
That's irresponsible.
if you mess up
Yeah,
something like that, like
yeah.
that's not just your ass. That's everybody's ass. Because
It, not to mention, right? You're dropping one of the biggest bombs ever
mhm,
made, right? um, who are you affecting when you do that, right? You get a slap on the hand or a reprimand or paperwork in your file and get to go home and sleep at night, right?
right.
What do they get to do on the other end of that?
Pieces
So
maybe.
exactly. So it's very thought out, big big planning phase. And just lot of people on their game. But seeing that go out, I mean, that was oh man,
Yeah.
wow.
Like we did it right, and also that's a big boom.
Yeah, yeah, right. Everybody wants to see the big booms, right?
Yeah. It's
Um, oh man, on the not so positive side, yeah, there was some stuff. I'll how do I want to say
if you
this?
need to dance around it, by all means.
Dance around it a little bit, because I don't mean to paint anybody in a negative light, but
Oh, you can
I will.
omit names if you need to. There's no need.
Oh, there won't be any names. But there was one time, because of me going and doing that research, doing my studying, diving into this job. What can I get out of this job? Right, putting myself into it. There was one time I called out. Um, that was my job. A woman and a kid. They got into a truck. This truck was there was intelligence already on the truck. There's a reason why we were following it for being a VBIED.
Right.
And it was headed towards friendly forces. um, Me being who I was and wanting to study, this was about the time with ISIS going on, and the people living there were under such a heavy control
Right.
that basic supplies for them just weren't readily available, and people would risk their lives to just go deliver water. And I've seen it where they would just get a bongo truck, tank of water in the back, and just speed around town trying to deliver water before the curfew or before ISIS wakes up, what have you,
Hmm.
right? That was another oh man is like that's what they're doing. But this one truck, had intelligence on it, and I'll have to trust that intelligence that it was a feed bed. With my experience, I thought it was one of those water trucks. Um, saw what I believe to be a woman and kid get in it. Um, and this is that risk assessment that you were talking about. Somebody higher than me didn't care, and we blew up that truck, and it was pretty humbling for me. It was one of those old man's like
Were,
in multiple ways, right? Am I actually doing a good job? Do I matter? Like I called this out. I said something. Like, do I even matter?
when
It,
someone
it,
when a switch higher than you gets flipped over you and it overrides you.
yeah,
Yeah.
but um, it's war, man. It is what it is. You have to press on. There's somebody higher than me or somebody with more intelligence than me, more info than me, I should say, um, more accurately. But that has a reason to believe this is what it is. I'm only kind of just coming into it, so maybe I don't have all the say in the world. I'm just here now and now going forward, but there's this whole package of data and information on why we're here in the first place.
Right.
So I just have to trust that. But that was an old man for me for sure on that side of things, and in many more ways than one.
Oh, I'm sure. It's well, that has to be an emotional event too, because it's almost, especially if you're following individuals for, you're learning their routines, you're watching them, their family members, and you know and when ordinance might impact, and there may or may not be a secondary on something that got called out being a VBID. I mean, if you're right, there's a sigh of relief. If you're wrong, your heart sinks. I mean, in my imagination of it, but you're right. It's war, and you had to trust that someone else above you had to shine your rock, and
Yeah,
that maybe that person was on the way to do something. And, there's too many what ifs, but I think you're right. You can't really drag yourself out about it.
yeah,
I
for
mean,
sure.
you called out what you saw, and it was acknowledged, and someone else higher made a call. But
Yep.
it's certainly that is certainly an old man. It's there's
It was
there was a did and it
interesting to
did
say the
why.
least. Yeah.
One of the did.
But it made me want to just dive in deeper, honestly. Kind of that I'm not gonna let this happen again mindset, right? Like
For sure.
I'm gonna better justify things. I'm not even I couldn't even tell you with 100% because when you're doing these missions, right? Whether it's the
Mhm.
video or the high altitude imagery, what have you, you can never give 100% confidence call.
Right.
Because there's always that 1% room for error, right? And so I could have been completely wrong, right?
Right.
That's why you have to trust those who may know better, right?
The other
Um,
judges.
yeah, exactly.
So, but it is good that it kind of took a more of a positive push towards you. I think I can respect that a lot. So
Sure, man, for sure.
that answers my next question, actually. So we'll go ahead and pop over that one.
Well,
So
what was it? Don't
oh,
let the people skip out on the question.
what was frustrating about working in military intelligence? And I think that others didn't dive in, and sometimes you weren't read in the whole things, and you had both good and bad days. I think, unless there's something you want to add to it.
No, I mean, yeah, that pretty much hits it right on the nail. Yeah, 100%.
So in the after, so what lessons would you say that you've taken from military intelligence into later life?
Um, what lessons? Let's see. Um, don't don't look over the little things. Don't have a tunnel vision, right? Put in the work, put in the effort. There's a reason why you're here, right? You may not see it. You may not ever know the outcome of this decision or that or your involvement in it. You may not know the outcome, but what really clicked into me because I was on that autopilot for a while.
Mm-hmm.
For a while, I was like, man, this looks like it's just like the Call of Duty AC-130 missions, right?
Right.
It's like, oh, I played a video game, or you get those little moments where it's like, do I even matter? Like, I made a call and nobody cared, right?
Mm-hmm.
People care, and people's lives may depend on it.
Right.
Um, so no matter how small your job may be, or how small your part in your job may be, even if you know it's small, there's a reason why you're there. There's a reason why you're doing it. There's a reason why there's a focus on this small part. Do it well because I guarantee at the end of the line somewhere, somebody's life depends on it. Period.
All right. Hey, that's a good lesson. I have expected you to be like, hey, I have a dossier on everyone that I know. I have a file folder this thick on my wife, and I'm like, oh shit. You know what? I wasn't.
I mean, don't don't trust too easily now either. On that, don't trust too easily. Do your research on every little thing, right? It doesn't take long. We have the internet at our fingertips. You've got something stronger than the Apollo mission in your pocket, right? Like,
Yeah, and
do your research.
half the people use it get in fights with people on the internet. It's
Yeah,
subtotal human
exactly. Right.
knowledge. So it's
Just it's unlimited knowledge, right? Exactly. Right. It's unlimited knowledge. Do a little bit of research, get some answers, make a thoughtful, decision. Um, on that.
right.
Don't trust too easily, right? Actually on that note, as the director for the security department, I hire people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, when you're looking for a job, you give out a resume, and that resume, it's just a bragging sheet. You're not going to put the bad things that happen on your resume, right? I have to go find that as part of my job,
I bet you're good
right?
at
Some tips and tricks.
it.
It's mostly all about networking if you
Sure.
know people. Dive just that much deeper. But I mean, you can get anything on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn even.
Yeah.
Um, I found a YouTube video on one of the guys I was interviewing for the position, and it wasn't a great YouTube video. So it's like, well, yeah, I'm gonna ask about this in the interview, my guy.
Yeah, you have to because especially as an employer, I mean, it reflects on you.
Yeah,
I've only ever
exactly.
had two jobs call my references. The current job I have now, and when I applied to the military. Because that, I mean,
Mhm.
back when I was doing it was a 40-page job application. I'm just like, oh man, and they called everybody as far as I'm aware of.
Yeah.
So it was like those are the only two jobs, and I think I work for a nonprofit now. So, but
It
uh, so I can imagine. So it's if there's digging to
no.
be done, there's dirt. Uh,
And honestly, you brought up the references. As the employer, I don't call references.
mhm.
I know what they're gonna say.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, rightfully so. They should be saying that about you. That's why you picked them as references,
Mhm.
right? So I don't waste the time with that. I know what they're gonna say, and that's cool to me. Don't I'm not gonna lose the respect on that. You've got people that think highly of you, and that's awesome. That's good. Um, but yeah, exactly on that. I'm me personally. I'm not gonna call it references, but what you just mentioned, and they went and spoke with everybody. That sounds like my whole clearance investigation.
Everyone
They
you've
they
known the
went.
last 10 years.
Oh my gosh, they went to people I didn't even put on the list. Next door neighbors, the houses that you live
Hmm.
near, like they went everywhere.
I I believe it. I was on the cusp of doing that, even though they wanted to put me in SIGINT first, uh,
Oh, okay.
and then human, which is why this is called human.
Gotcha.
I feel like it was a miscalling, but again, neither here nor there. And I don't know why they were like, "Hey, you can do whatever you want. Here's $20,000 if you'll do SIGINT." And I'm like, "Great, colorblind, fuck." And that's now we're here. Now I'm interviewing people with a catchy military acronym. So I'll take it. But I'm going off script on this one.
Sure.
Uh, so based on both your military intelligence background and a law enforcement background, we'll transition into a law enforcement background here in a minute. But do you think that there are coincidences, and how do you interpret your gut reaction to things?
In my experience,
Mm-hmm.
there are no such things as coincidences.
I agree.
That's it. Um, Sometimes maybe you are in the wrong place for the wrong or at the wrong time.
But it's bad luck.
But it's not a coincidence that you were there. You had something to go do while you were there. But in my experience, right, like let's say for instance, I'm looking at a building. We have intelligence on the building that um it's bad guy hideout, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And they got a whole bunch of motorcycles outside of it. Well, if you pull up in your motorcycle, right, like I'm going to assume you're part of bad guy, right?
Right.
Why else would you be there at that time? Like there, there's a little bit more to it than that.
Sure. Sure.
Um, but man, my man, this ain't a gas station, like
Why were you here
uh,
specifically matching everybody else? Like
yeah,
it's either that or just real bad luck.
yeah. It transfers over into the LE to the jail to my current job, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
there's no such things as coincidences. I caught you here doing XYZ like for a reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now I'll investigate,
Sure.
right? I'll ask questions, and if you're not a part of it, cool. But if you were here at this time, like you probably had something.
Right.
It's just nothing I could lay on or should explore any further. I just don't believe in coincidences.
Gotcha. So when Bandito's gut feeling goes off, how do you react to that? Whether it be past military experience, law enforcement, security, or even in like dealing with friends in your civilian life.
Yeah, 100%. If my gut's going off, yeah, I listen to it. I listen to it heavenly, heavenly, not heavenly. But yeah, it's important to me. There's a reason why it's feeling that way. There's a reason why I'm feeling they got that spidey sense going
Right.
off, right? Like
Well, your instincts are
um
kicking in.
yeah, exactly. That's all that is. Your instincts are kicking in, whether it's subconscious or in the front of your mind. Listen to it. I do. So far, I believe it's treated me fairly. It most of the time, it's over something like I don't really need to be here. in the
Right.
first place. Like, this isn't to my life, detrimental to my life. Like, I'm just gonna bug out.
Hey, maybe I
Um,
shouldn't eat this Taco Bell.
yeah, to that, right? Like, oh man, I just this is gonna be too greasy of food or something. I don't know. My gut's telling me I shouldn't eat this.
Yeah.
Listen to it.
Yeah, for sure.
It's doing it for a reason.
Or, hey, my buddy's giving me a weird story, and I'm just, that's, like, hey, that's
Yeah,
the mathing is what I tell people that I work with.
yeah. But then you also have to weigh, right?
Sure.
Is it worth it to bring up? Is it worth it to act on it? Right? The instance you gave exactly right. My buddy's telling a BS story. Is it worth it to call him out on it?
Right.
You know, you do have to weigh that sometimes.
Yeah, especially with stories that sometimes people tell is they get real defensive about it.
Sure, sure. Or it's gonna halt a project, or it's gonna take them a couple steps back from whatever they're doing. Is it really important if I call them out on this right now? Probably not. All right, just let them go and be happy.
We
You
talk
know?
about it later.
Yeah, we'll talk about it later. Maybe if it's worth it to me to bring up, like, we'll see.
For sure. So now transitioning, kind of we're going back around eventually. My ADHD will kick in a little bit, but so going from MI to LE, were there any challenges jumping over any hills, or did it just kind of gradient in?
It kind of just went hand in hand, really. First foremost, right? The military, the discipline it puts in you. The I went in right after high school, so 18 years old. Like, if I would have tried to jump into LE at that time, I would have been just way too young. Maybe not young in age. There's a lot of people that do it, and good on them. Computer just went off.
I got you.
Uh, but um, so there's a lot to be said about that. Before you jump into the LE, like, it, the military definitely made me grow up.
Hmm.
Um, but really, a lot of stuff just kind of went hand in hand. It was all a lot of useful information that I still carried over, as far as just what I said earlier, not having that tunnel vision. Look at the whole picture. I got 88 inmates in this cell block to make sure they survive the end of the day, right?
Right.
Make sure I go home at the end of the day. Um, what is going on in all these little nooks and crannies, right? Am I is this inmate talking to me because he's distracting me while this other one's going on? Like,
Right.
have that open eye, you know? Uh, that
Situational awareness, I think, saves lives.
Yes, yes, yes. And that's probably the biggest thing that just kind of made that transition pretty smooth.
Right, especially from like an imagery thing, because you're already trained to just kind of look for the little details that people are trying to hide.
Yeah. It's funny, right? Because in games, you've got the crosshair on your screen, right? That's the aiming point, and you tunnel visions on that crosshair, but you're missing all this stuff that's happening in the rest of the screen, right?
Right.
It's that is what's gonna give you that informed decision. It's not gonna be this crosshair right in the middle screen. It's gonna be all this other stuff, right? My bad cable management, my little M4 sitting up there. Look at those things.
Right. It's what do they say? The devil's in the details, and the details are usually in the periphery.
Exactly.
So it's
Exactly.
and
That's where they want them to be,
that well yeah
because
that's
they know that's where you're not looking.
and if that's where what is it? The human perception doesn't see what it's not looking for.
Exactly.
So which is why you can even outline. It's very important. Like just instinctively, a human looks for a silhouette with a weapon. You
Yeah.
see it in the dark,
Mhm.
and it's I think it's really interesting that that's like a foremost thing that you never think would lend well to a law enforcement. But I also think, I'm speaking to age, I think in order to be a good cop, uh, you need to have some self awareness about the culture that you're in, because I mean, there's too many stories of people that don't do that,
Mm.
and
I mean,
it's
you definitely need to know what you're about. Um, and w- when you're in law enforcement, whether you agree with the law or you don't, it's your job to enforce it, right? And so you really have to know what you're about. Am I ready to do this? If a crime happens in front of me, it's your duty to intervene.
right.
Off duty or on duty, doesn't matter. It's your duty to intervene. Period. We had an email come out from the attorney general um, over something that a sister hospital did, but they spread the knowledge around just to make sure everybody's in the know.
Hmm.
There's no such thing as an off duty cop. You may be in civilian clothes, you may be going to your kid's baseball game, what have you. You're a cop. You're on duty. If a
Right.
crime happens in front of you, you have to go and intervene. And are you ready to do that? You really have to be self aware like that. Yeah, yeah, I'm capable of doing that. Okay, cool. Right?
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that you can't be on autopilot and do well. There's plenty. I mean, there's years and years and years of experience of just a litany roll of people that were on autopilot. And what was it, the Acorn guy the other month? And it's just guy wasn't paying
I've,
attention, and or was paying attention in like a combat role. Like I'm not a cop. I'm not even a little dude. Like, but I mean, adrenaline's a bitch and a half. But I mean,
yeah,
it seems like there was no self awareness there. No, I mean, my criticism only goes so far because I'm not law enforcement. And sure, I will give it that, but that's a lot.
the story is still the same, no matter what job or career path or what have you. It goes with the autopilot, right? Well, another word we can use for autopilot is complacency. And what does complacency do? It kills.
No, it's yeah. And, I mean, and then you go one step next to it. It's the other person with him turned, and I guess all that they heard was he'd been hit, and they did likewise. So whether or not they did their search and assess, kind of whatever, or just act on instinct, uh, that's a little bit. I can give that a little bit more credence, but it's
Yeah,
autopilot and complacency. It almost did, and luckily the guy in the back of that vehicle didn't buy it that day. Uh,
for sure. And hindsight's always going to be 2020.
for sure.
And you have to just come to terms with that. You're not always going to make the right decision, but back on that, right? Give yourself the best chance. Um, listen to those gut feelings, and maybe they did. Maybe they did. I wasn't there. I couldn't say.
Right.
Um, but we're looking at it with 2020 vision now, hindsight, right? So
Yeah, and that's an important thing to remember. It's dude. I mean, he might not be cut out for the job, and just
maybe,
had a gross overreaction. And you know, I don't know that I would do any better. Like I've never thought I've been getting shot at before. I mean, short of a video game or airsoft or something like that. But no, I've never had a bullet whiz by my head.
yeah,
So,
completely different.
oh,
Completely different.
it the perception thing, the stories that I've heard about people that have heard the crack or the snap or however it changes reality. So
Oh,
my hat goes off to all of them. I'm not wearing a hat, uh, but transitioning again. That's the word of the day. Transition. Uh,
all about it.
so what would you say are the advantages and maybe disadvantages beyond always being on duty as with an LE job?
Advantages and disadvantages. It almost plays out to any kind of salary type job,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like my job right now, like my phone always has to be on. If I get a phone call, I have to answer it, right?
Right.
Um, so it's like, all right, well, hey, it's Friday night. I might have a couple of drinks. Well, after you take your first shot, guess what's gonna start blowing up? Your phone.
Every time.
Oh, something needs to happen. We need more people, or I need you to come here. And it's like, I can't now. I just
Right.
had my shot. Like I can't legally do this. There's those types of disadvantages. But probably the biggest thing disadvantage wise, there's a lot of people that like your presence.
Hmm.
There's a lot more people that don't like it.
Right. There's certainly a slippery
Um,
slope these days.
yeah, and so even before like the time it is now, where a lot of people don't like cops, even before that, you show up. Why are you here? Oh, you called the police, or just you being there. Like they don't like that you're there. People don't like you. People will automatically start yelling at you or whatever. It's just nature, right?
Right.
You're there to enforce something, and people are gonna like that.
Right.
Period.
You are a
Um,
professional party pooper. Now,
exactly,
now you are
exactly.
also a professional lifesaver. People forget
Yes,
that until they need you. Uh,
there's the benefits, right?
right. And I mean, even growing up, I even, it's weird now that I grew up in kind of a not maybe a rural family, but maybe like certainly a southern family. And it was cops were always Johnny Law. But I was always taught that you might not like Johnny Law, but you're always respectful because he has a dangerous job. You might not, and you might not like what's going on here. But on the flip side, if you're nice to him, you have a better chance of not getting in trouble. But it was there's certain things you don't do, or there's the stigma to it, and I can't say I agree with all of it. I've met good and bad, um,
Sure.
and I think that does actually lead to my next question: is do you think you saw more good or more bad inside?
I've seen more good. I've seen way more good. Um, and honestly, it's the people working those beat jobs. It's the people out on the street. It's the people working the units, alongside me or whatnot. Those that's the good. I'll probably get slapped for saying it, but I mean, it's when you start getting into the man. I don't know about you. That's the people with the rake on their sleeves,
It's
right? Like it's the people that make the actual decisions, right? The people on the beat or the people in the units, they have discretion. They use the discretion.
right,
But when you start getting the rank, the discretion starts to limit because now you're liable.
right.
If that makes
You're
sense.
saving your own skin,
You're saving your own skin.
and it's. I think I'm with you on that one. And then certainly think it is maybe not all, but maybe in the visibility of it all, is one bad apple is full of the bunch,
Sure.
and it's especially
100%.
nowadays because everybody's got a phone. One
Mhm.
goes bad. In my opinion, I've seen more people get in trouble by like not keeping their mouth shut, and sometimes you
Yeah.
shouldn't. I mean, there's to say that there are times where things do go bad, but there was a video of the dude like arresting his chief because the dude just showed up drunk to a call. Like, what were you thinking?
What the
Like,
heck were you thinking?
and I used to work in like the firearms business in a tangential way, but you meet a lot of cops there, and for the most part,
Sure.
they were all cool dudes. Uh, there were the assholes that were like, hey, I'm a cop, you need to give me a better deal on this. I'm like, hey, I can't. I mean, I'm not like a normal dealer that can give you a blue line special for it, but for the
There's a couple schools of thought on that. Was first I like to say like I've never believed in asking for those deals. Yeah, sure, I could go and get military discounts on a lot of things.
sure.
I never asked for that. That's not why I serve. That's not why I do this job,
So you don't go to Denny's.
right? I go to Denny's all the time, but I'm not gonna set forth and make sure I get that discount. Like that's not why I did this.
Yeah, for sure.
Um,
Mad
my
respect for
wife
that, by
hates
the way.
it. My wife hates it. Why did you tell? That's not what I did this for. Um,
It almost like
but
kind of turns it into transactional, which I think muddies it a little bit.
it, yeah, it does. Everything's transactional. Everything is transactional. But on the other point there, and one of those biggest disadvantages is that people don't look at you this way, but cops are humans too,
Right. Hey,
right? We are gonna make mistakes, but if your brother, your sister, your dad, your mom, what have you, get in trouble, you're gonna go fight for them, right?
right,
For the most part, you're gonna go fight for them. So if my partner over here did some dumb crap, I'm gonna fight for him.
right,
And so that bad apple, starts to ruin that bunch that way too, right? Now
Right.
everybody's looked in that bad light because you were trying to cover for him. Well, he's my partner. That's what I'm supposed to be doing,
Right. He'd
right?
do the same
He's my
thing.
brother. This is my sister, right? Like
Hmm.
they would do the same thing.
Well, especially as I think, especially in a partner situation, is very much like dudes in the military. If somebody got shot next or shot at next to you, and they were the only person there to help you, you're gonna make sure that
That's your best friend.
right. It's what death makes brothers of us all, and the threat of it. Almost.
Mm,
It's it, and I think
speaks volumes.
it speaks volumes, and like you might even if it's maybe not the best thing to do at the time to cover for them. I think there's certain things like, hey, we need to talk about this. Like, you don't need to be doing that again. But like,
And if always go talk about it, right? Um, because there's that balance too that you got to find because if you don't cover for them or you don't at least stand with them, um,
they're gonna leave you out hanging next time.
they're gonna leave you out hanging next time. Your other brothers and sisters, your other partners, they're not gonna give a crap about you. And I've seen instances where someone outed someone and they started receiving death threats in the mail, right?
Right.
From other police officers. Like, what are you doing? Like, it's an interesting balance that you have to try to find. But when I was interviewing for one of the police agencies, it wasn't Bear County,
Right.
but I went in front of a panel board of just beat cops.
Right.
Right, that was one thing I thought was cool. Like it helps the buy-in a little bit. They get a say in who their partner is going to be. Right,
It's a little bit of a
super
peer
cool.
element, peer review element.
Exactly. One of the questions they asked was, it's 2 a.m. You respond to a gas station for a burglary. The gas station's been closed. You search the premises. Yeah, you see the break-in that had occurred, but um, the perp's not there anymore. Your partner takes a Snickers bars from the counter and says, "Well, at least I'll get myself a treat," and then he walks out.
Right.
What do you do? Honestly, and I told it, and I passed this panel board interview. I'll bring up the giving your mom a speeding ticket question too because they did ask that. But
Yeah.
um, I told him I might talk to the guy and say, "Hey, why are you gonna put me in liability of that? Like, don't do that to me, you
Right.
know?" But am I gonna call my sergeant? Am I gonna arrest him for stealing for a Snickers bar? No, I'm not gonna arrest anybody for stealing a Snickers bar. I don't care if it was not my partner. It's dumb. Um, Talk to the guy, but no, I'm not gonna report it. I'm not gonna do any of that, right? And they set it up in such a way that you may think that's what they want to hear is, yeah, I'll report it. No, that's not what they want to hear. And there's a lot of levels to that. It's
Right.
not just like, oh, are you going to be a part of the good old boy system? Yeah, that might be a part of it, maybe, but it's more of just like, do you have that discretion? Because that's a big part of being a police officer. Is do you have that discretion?
Right.
Appropriate discretion and arresting somebody over a Snickers bar or potentially ruining somebody's career because of a Snickers bar. Get out of here.
Yeah.
It's not worth it.
It seems like a poor hill to die on.
Yeah,
Now, granted, as a police officer, you probably shouldn't do that.
you shouldn't.
Right. But which is why that's an internal thing. It's the same thing with like you're having a buddy, and it's a friends group, and like, hey, the dude just takes the last beer out of somebody else's fridge. You're like, hey, dude, that's not cool. Am I gonna start a fight about it? No. But
No.
like we might have some words later about it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, come on, man. Like, that was cool, but am I gonna make a big stink out of it? No. I'll
Right.
go get another beer or something, right? Like, is it worth it? No. No,
Right.
it's not. But
So,
that's that.
but is that what they wanted to hear?
That's what they wanted to hear. Again, that's the biggest thing they're looking for is do you have that discretion? Are you going to be able to make accurate calls? Like
Mm-hmm.
if you can't make this call with somebody that you're supposed to be comfortable with, your partner in that sense,
You trust your
how
wife
can
with
I
it.
trust you? Yeah, how can I trust you to have this same kind of discretion with Joe Blow on the street?
Right.
You know, are you going to treat them the same way? That's all they're really looking for. Maybe there's that little tiny bit of that good old boy system, but I don't think it's I don't think it's over that.
Well, I think $1.50 is a lot different than maybe something like $200 or $300. Like,
Yeah, if dude's like if you're training day pocketing millions of cash like off of a drug raid or something, like uh
I'm gonna have
you're putting me in a bind, partner.
yeah, it was one of the dudes that I used to deal with at my last job was he ended up moving out of it, but when I first met him, he was internal affairs. He was like the head of the internal
Oh
affairs for
man.
my county's area. So he was like, I'm the dude that I keep everybody straight. Nobody likes me. And
Yeah. Nobody's gonna like
he ended up becoming a captain, and good on. He was yeah, I guess maybe you'd call him a good old boy, but he certainly understood that, hey, this is visible. I have to make sure that we do the things right and make sure that everybody looks good.
yeah.
And I have a lot of respect for him. And I mean, I've met a lot of dudes that I have a lot of respect for, and then I've met a couple that I'm like, oh wow, yeah, how do you keep this job? Because the LE community, at least a good LE community. I can't say all of them are like this, but they at least weed the bad ones out.
Sure.
Because
And there are a lot of like unions and protections and things like that. A lot of them start off shit hot,
right,
right? And then turn over time. That was the one thing with the Bear County Sheriff's Office that I didn't like, especially coming straight out of the military to
mm-hmm.
this. They didn't require like annual fitness exams, right? And so now you got like this 20-year-old vet, or not 20-year-old, but 20-year veteran on the
Mm-hmm.
force who's like 500 pounds, and it's like,
What are you gonna do?
really?
What are you gonna do? Uh,
Yeah, like, it's those little things like that, but
right. It was I guess it's my turn to tell a story on my own interview.
sure.
But to relate to that, it was this this guy. I won't use his name, but this is I think about the time he became a captain, maybe a little before. Uh, there was an officer been killed, and the guy's partner, or no, it was a responder. I'm sorry. But as the people that were fleeing, they were eventually caught. But he dumped his whole mag down a dark street. And as they were going through the cleanup, they're like, hey, why are there 15 40 caliber shell casings in the middle of the street? Oh, I shot at it. I'm like, why? You don't know what's down there. Well, what if you hit somebody's house? I'm like, I didn't think about that. Well, I don't think the guy lasted very long after that. But it's
There's
discretion
a
is one
couple
thing,
schools
but
of thought on that.
there's overview too, and
Yeah,
I think that officer didn't have the correct discretion on that one. I think maybe he got a little worked up. I think he was shit when he
maybe.
knew.
It's very possible, but you do have that discretion. You gotta play it along with your gut feeling. Um, and you know this about firearms, right? If you're gonna shoot the dang thing, know what's beyond your target, right? That's one of the 4 rules of safety, right? Like, know what you're shooting at.
Right.
But I will say this, and this is what I seem to be kind of a misconception, um, across the board is, well, why are there 100 rounds over here? Why did you fire 100 rounds? If I've got justification to shoot 1 round, I've got justification to shoot 100.
Right.
That's the one thing. Well, it's not the one thing. There's a lot of things, but one of the things that I saw consistent throughout the military, throughout LE, and there's plenty of research topics on this subject, is it ain't the size of the round that matters.
It's the number.
It's the number.
Right.
That's why most police agencies, most people opt to carry the 9mm because you can
Right.
carry more rounds. You'll have those people that are like, "Oh, my 45 will get the job done." Maybe.
I I still call it 45 AARP. Uh, but I think kind of speaking to that, what I worked with, and you worked with firearms in multiple jobs. I think I watched another interview with somebody, and he referred to things as timers and switches. Bleeding is a timer. A switch is something that just turns it off, and bullets aren't always switches.
No.
It's more about placement than caliber. I think sure a spear gold dot opens up to the size of my hand sometimes, but which that'll do it. But it
That's
doesn't do much if you graze me in the arm, and it's
mm,
that's bad, but it's not the end of the world. Uh,
yeah,
I'd be more in as a civilian and in undisclosed age, uh, would be more concerned that I'm getting shot at all. Oh,
yeah.
yeah,
And another thing on that is you can be, Chris Kyle with your shots, right? You can be a sharpshooter like no tomorrow, winning tons and tons of competitions. When shit gets real and you potentially have another gun in your face, how many shots are you going to put on target? Because you are moving, they are moving, your heart beating's faster than it's ever done in its life. Their heart is beating it faster than it ever has. How many shots are you actually going to hit? That's why you need more than bigger.
right.
You need more rounds than bigger rounds.
What is it? How so? Especially going back to you don't know until it's happened. You don't know how
Yeah,
you're gonna
yeah.
react, and you have so many instances of you know shootouts happening at 10 or 12 feet, and no one gets hit,
No one.
and it's like in the sideline quarterback moment, like how did that happen? They're like, well, you weren't there. Like,
Yeah,
sorry, my backside was puckered up to the size of a Cheerio, so I was scared. Like,
yeah.
so it's training can do a little bit to that, but experience is the elephant, as it were. You've seen the elephant, and
Mhm.
I think it's difficult to judge as an outsider. And I think
It, yeah.
it's
It goes a little further too, right? We're saying it a lot. You don't know what you're gonna do until it happens. Experience plays into that, training plays into that,
mhm,
but every situation is new.
right,
You don't know how you're going to handle that situation until it happens. It doesn't matter if you've been dealing with similar situations for the past 50 years.
right.
This one's completely new.
Well, your body doesn't know the difference between a gunfight and a wedding.
No, it doesn't.
So I'm sure your wedding was as stressful as anything, and
There were some fires. There
hey,
were some fires.
yeah, it's I'm sure your heart rate was like 140 or something like that, and it's but your body does
Most
know.
nervous I ever been.
I believe it, and
I,
I'm
I've
sure
been shot at. I've been confronted. I've been this and that. That was the most nervous I ever been.
right. And again, you don't know what's gonna happen because as far as I know about you, you've never been in that situation before, and I mean,
Yeah.
I'm glad it
First
worked
wedding,
out.
last wedding.
First wedding, last wedding. So it's I'm glad you made it out alive.
Almost did it.
Almost didn't. Yeah, that would have been bad. Bandito has a heart attack on his wedding day. I'm like, oh man, it's not a good way to go. So
It was fun.
so transitioning to the last topic,
Sure.
going from because we both met in a gaming group.
Yeah.
So
Almost 10 years now.
eight, eight-ish.
8,
So
yeah.
yeah. And this is a first for the interview. I've never talked about 121 before.
Oh,
So
man.
I do need to get East in here at some point, but I need to reach out to him first. East will be a good interview if he says yes. Uh,
That one you might wanna do live.
that
Anyways.
I'm not good enough talker to escape editing. I'm not gonna lie to you. He's better at that than I am. But how would a game? It's not just a shooter, but more of a simulation game, especially where you like in Arma 3 where you build the mission. How does that scratch the itch for you? Because I know you have a lot of passion for doing stuff like that.
Yeah, 100%, man. I'm still involved in TF121, lightly. I've just kind of
About as much as I
gotten
am.
older and kinda gone away from that routine basis. I still play video games, it's
Sure.
just, like, I don't know when I'm gonna play 'em.
Mm-hmm.
So but when I do get involved with TF121, I create missions. That's what I do. I man, that's what I've been doing probably for the past 5 years. I rarely play the game, I create the mission. But in joining that group, and it's been an amazing experience. Made a lot of good friends from it. Put some really good friends onto it that love it. Ott, gotta shout him out.
Yeah,
Um,
I have an interview with him tomorrow, actually.
oh no,
Yeah, that'll be a good one.
I'm sorry. um, but no, actually, I got a picture of your boy right here from the wedding.
Eh,
That's a little hot right there.
that's
Uh, showed up with a mohawk. That's
oh
my boy.
that is one of the reasons I wanted to interview him, but just because
Yeah,
he's such a wild card.
he is, man. But he's the he'll give you the shirt off the back kind of
Oh,
guy.
dude is super solid.
Yeah, solid. But sorry, wait, we
No, go ahead.
digress to your question. It it 100% scratches the itch
Mhm.
because um yeah, it may all be simulated events, but you're getting into some pretty hairy events with a bunch of buddies.
Right.
And so now you've got stories that you could tell and inside jokes, and you just build that camaraderie that is just hard to find.
Well, we have
Um,
the inside joke between you and me where we were sitting in, and I was sitting in a turret, and you were just
just lying down, looking around, and there's Duck's ass.
yeah, 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 and it's just shit, and that never died,
Yeah,
and it's like,
still my team speak picture.
well, if only my ass was that good in real life. It's not, but
Hey, don't worry, your
I was,
ass is picture worthy.
man, I wasn't. I was one of the platoon leaders of all time. I'll give myself that.
Oh yeah.
I was very from the front when I was told by everybody else, maybe you should do that. I'm like, fuck you.
I remember. I remember we would be going doing mission XYZ, and here you go off another land, and it's like, crap, we're the command element. We gotta stay with you, and you're off
You
going to
were
do
with me the whole
something. Some
time. I
others,
didn't go up on mission.
you
You were
had to
with me the
be.
whole
You had no
time.
backup.
I never needed it.
No, no, you didn't. I will say that you never needed it, but it's like that's our commander. Somebody go get him.
Lieutenant!
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was. But I was always at least really good with. Ironically, despite being a super duper introvert, I was always really good with the radio. Even if I wasn't like succinct, I could process the information pretty good.
Mm,
And I can see where because we had a lot of dudes that were or are military or law enforcement,
sure.
and it's everything from like I think we had like a PFC or a private, and then I think we had I think I won't say his name, but the dude's a colonel now, and it's just like cool. Like, but there,
Yeah.
with him, we couldn't play the Fallujah map because PTSD.
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, you're right. There were a lot of cool, even though I'm not very involved with it anymore, other than just like Discord and memeing on people or attempting to meme on people. It's. I'm glad that I started it, and I'm glad that it still exists, even though I'm not like involved in leading it anymore. It's still cool to be like, look what I did.
Yeah.
And then I got to meet a lot of cool people, like you, East, Colin, and no, there's a lot. There's a lot of people. Too many people to
Oh
name,
yeah.
and I don't really want to like. I'm gonna have to go back and just bleep those
Yeah.
names. But it's it's
That.
good. It certainly scratches an itch, but I think it scratches
Yeah.
an itch differently for me than it does for you.
Uh, maybe. Because I mean, you're saying exactly why it scratches the itch for me, right? I'm not in the military anymore. I'm not in
Mm-hmm.
LE anymore. I still keep up with those connections I made, right? You and me, we're not heavily involved in TF121 that much anymore. We're not going and playing the regular Sunday missions or anything, but we still have those connections.
Right.
That's what it was to us,
Right.
right?
For sure.
That's the itch that it scratches, and it's a big itch. Um, but it just does that, right? I mean, 8 years now. When's the last Sunday mission you played? When's the last Sunday mission I played? Right?
It's been
We're
a while.
still here talking. We're
Right.
still here sharing jokes. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and then YouTube's gonna be like, what? Where's this? And I'll throw the link down there somewhere to like have
Yeah.
flooding. Can he handle it now? But
Ye-
and it's You know,
Yeah.
those dudes have been around for a while too, and they're in with they're supplementing the current owner.
Hmm.
Save me some editing. I won't use his name. I'll
Sure.
eventually get him in here too. And then East was led it for a while. East was a unique about it. He was a lot more vocal about everything, and he was very life of the party. I'm actually going to
Very
reach
much
out to
so.
him this week about this. I don't know if he'll do it. I hope he does it. Um, there
I
won't
bet
be
he
a
would.
there
I
won't
bet
be
he
a
would.
postscript if he decides not to, but because I know he's
He
very
is an
busy.
extrovert like no one's tomorrow. That dude is not an introvert by any means, so he
It's
might do it.
and I have a couple. I'll share one East story. East is like the first person from Task Force 121 that I ever met in person. And I sold him a gun at my last job. First, like, for right off, just like, hey, you have one of these? Oh yeah. Uh, but it's the first time I ever met him, and he looked. I mean, you've met the dude, in person or not? Maybe I'm not sure,
Mhm.
but
I have.
yeah. So you know that smile he's got on his face the whole time, and he sounds like he's got because I don't think. I mean, I've seen him mad. I so it's he doesn't always have that smile on his face, but he's always like a good time. But
Yeah.
we went shooting the second time I met him, and we had someone come out from Texas over here, and we went shooting. And he went to tell one of his neighbors that hey, there's going to be it's the South. I mean, that just happens. Like hey, there's going to be some shooting, but he didn't walk over, he didn't drive over, he rode a lawnmower. And I'm just
Yeah.
sitting here in
That's
like the middle of nowhere, just be like, where? What am I doing? Where am I? How did my life get here? Uh,
that's about
I I wouldn't change it, but it's been a good time, and I'm glad I met you and Ott and all those other guys. I wouldn't change it for the world, even though I
not at
don't.
all.
I mean, like I'm kind of the deadbeat dad about it, but uh, so
No,
I,
and you
I
built
I've
something
never
wonderful,
quite
dude.
come back from getting milk. Um, but it adds a lot of catharsis, and it was intense when it was the routine, and it was, but life and other things takes precedence. Um,
Sure.
I would call you crazy if you would go play Arma instead of hang out with your wife or fiance at the time or girlfriend, however long it's
She's
been.
she's very patient. So, very
Yeah,
patient.
but to finish this out, and I got to figure out how do I word it, and how I'm
Hit
gonna
me
edit
with it.
this to so if you had to sum everything up in two or three sentences, up from 18 and joining the military to tomorrow. If you had to sum everything up in two or three sentences, how would you?
Oh man.
That's pretty good for off the cuff. Because I didn't have that planned.
Yeah, ooh, that's a heavy load right there. I don't know if 2 to 3 sentences
All
quite
right,
cut it,
take
but
your time. If you need more than two or three sentences,
that's it right there, honestly. Um, if it's a lesson you're looking for, take your time and enjoy it while you still can. That kind of thing, like, just enjoy it at the moment. Everybody's got the phone in their face and taking pictures of every little thing, but are you actually looking at the thing with your eyes? Are you enjoying that with your actual eyes? Because that's what you're gonna miss. Phones will never capture it. Videos will never capture it. So take your time on that. But um, I don't know. I guess it's just kind of how I've tried to live. Um, I don't know. I don't. That's more than 2 sentences, but
it's a difficult question. My alternate
it's
was
hard. Yeah,
what would you
hard.
say to your 16-year-old self? But that's a whole different question.
Oh, there's a whole bunch of things that say to 16-year-old me
Oh
trying to prepare for
yeah, same here.
uh school. Go to school. I'm in school right now. Should have done it while I had the chance. When things were a lot easier. Now I'm juggling things, right? I mean, you could sum up a whole bunch of stuff like that, but I don't know if I had to sum it up, I just wished I took it slower. Same stuff would have happened.
Yeah.
I just would have wish I would have enjoyed it in the moment just a little bit more.
Hey, if that's what you got, that's not a bad way of having of a summation, in my opinion.
Fair enough.
All right. Uh, I don't have an outro. Is there anything you need to say? Is if you have a social media presence, where are you? If not, that's fine. Don't worry about it.
I don't.
All right.
I really don't. Any profiles I do have, it's just lurking.
No, hey, I'm not gonna. Then we won't expose you. Uh,
Fair enough. Good.
that is that has been the surprise of starting all of this is being on social media and dealing with the world. It is one of the
Sure.
things of all time. I will give it that. There's some cool.
100%.
It's but without alienating my audience too much. This has been it, Human with Delta Forks. I'm Delta Forks. That's Bandito. Thanks for showing up. Y'all have a good day.
Of course. Thank y'all.